We will get started here in just a few minutes, probably just 1 minute. We'll just see if anybody else is going to join us here a little bit after 10. So excited to talk about multi-sites today.
Hey, I see a familiar face. Steven, good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Good to seeing you. I saw this. I don't know if it's on a lot of talk. I guess we are, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I saw the meeting. I'm like, I got to see what's going on in the Drupal world and then Jason in general, honestly.
Yeah. This is it.
Yeah, Jason helped. Jason helped the project a while ago while I was at the Illinois Soybean Association, and glad to hear how things are going.
Cool. Good to have you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and kick things off. It's a little bit after 10. People can still join if they would like. And I'm just going to quickly say hi to everybody, and eventually I'll turn it over to Jason so he can share his expertise. But we're glad to have everybody join us today and talk a little bit more about multi-sites. If you're not already familiar with Pixo, we are a software consultancy in Champaign-Urbana. And we create custom websites, software, and applications that address unique challenges. I'm Danielle. I'm the account executive at Pixo, and I'm just helping facilitate today as we get kicked off. And I might interrupt a couple of times, but mainly this is going to be the Jason Rambeck show for sure. And we just want to encourage questions. It's not a giant crowd, so if you feel like you want to put something in the chat, please do. We can get to it, and just be comfortable with having our conversations about multi-site and answering anything you have. I am going to have a couple more people introduce themselves. I'm going to have Jenna actually go next from our team.
Hi, I'm Jenna. I'm the account coordinator here at Pixo. So I'll be handling the details today. I'll be putting some helpful information into the chat for you throughout the presentation. And like Danielle said, if you have questions throughout the presentation, you're welcome to share those in the chat. I'll keep an eye on those and we'll make sure that we get to them. There will be time at the end of the presentation today for Q&A. So if you'd rather just ask your question by unmuting and talking to Jason, you're welcome to do that at the end. We're also recording the webinar today, and I'll be sharing that after via email after the presentation. We also have some more information about connecting with Jason one-on-one. So we'll be sharing that information as well. And yeah, if you have questions, just pop them in the chat, and I'll keep an eye on them and make sure that Jason gets to them. Thanks.
Thanks, Jenna. Last but not least, I'm going to turn this over, the main part of the event, to Jason Rambeck, our lead web developer, and he's going to introduce himself, the topic today, and get us started. Off to you, Jason.
Thank you, Danielle. And yeah, just to reiterate what Jenna said, we don't have a lot of time to cover what could be a ton of information. And so we're kind of really just going to kind of be touching the surface of an overall view of what's possible with a multi-site, what kind of things it can support, and if there's an opportunity that you want to ask questions that we can't get to in today's time, or you have a specific scenario you'd like us to look over with you, let us know, reach out, and we'll give you our contact information, and you can set up a call or email us or whatever. So without further ado, the multi-site, a shared platform for a family of websites. The first thing I want to kind of get started with, well, actually, before I get started, just to introduce real quick, Lindsay Markle is here. She's a senior content strategist at Pixo. We work along with here, Tyler Edwards, who's a senior designer at Pixo, work together on these kinds of projects all the time. And this is kind of our team of sorts. There's more people on our team as well, but they're here to support and help answer questions too at the end if there are any. So I just want to introduce them real quick. But to get started, I want to sort of introduce what a multi-site is. And I think the easiest way to do that is to give some examples of multi-sites that are organizations or in this case, there's some government bodies, we have companies that might be able to use a multi-site to support their family or multiple sites that they support. So colleges, universities with multiple departments, that's an easy one for us. One of the big examples we're going to use today is with some work that we did with the College of Fine and Applied Arts. So we're going to get into a lot of details of how we supported them creating a multi-site to handle all of their different units. But a K through 12 school district, another great use case for having a multi-site. Their schools have very similar needs and very similar kinds of content that they need to support, as well as similar audiences. Government bodies with multiple departments. The first thing I think of is like county websites, big or small, to be honest, but especially small ones where the website needs to handle, I don't know, elections versus potentially a health department or other kinds of units that fall under the purview of a county. Then you have parent companies with sub-brands. I know I was recently reading about The Gap, who now has multiple brands that they support. Old Navy, I think Banana Republic, and there might be one more in there. And they have, I don't know exactly how their multi-site structure works, but you can tell that they basically have very, very differently branded sites, but they function very similarly in the way that they operate. And then the other one is owners of multiple stores, restaurants, or chapters. So these are organizations that have multiple, whether they're locations, or in the case of a chapter location, I guess is also a location as well, but where, again, they're serving the same audience, maybe a different audience, they're different people, maybe there's even different staff at different locations that need to update the site and run it. But the kinds of work that they're doing, the kind of things they need to communicate are the same, and probably offering the same kinds of products or services as well. So hopefully that kind of gets us thinking about what kinds of things a multi-site can do. And I like to break it down. I think there's certain things that you need to have that's the same to have a multi-site effort be successful, where you're trying to bring all your sites in under sort of one roof. And I think this is the easiest sort of way to break it down, to have enough shared features, enough shared layout or shape, I like to call it sometimes, or and actually not or, enough of a shared purpose. You don't really want to have a multi-site for a restaurant and a multi-site for a college. I mean, that's ludicrous in a lot of ways, but you can that's an extreme example of saying, hey, we need to have something they're very similar. They're similar enough to make it make sense to share, this roof or house that they're going to be under. The other question that often comes up is, how many sites can you support in a multi-site scenario? And I like to say, it makes sense often for even just 2 sites or more. We've worked on one of the multi-sites that we helped architect a few years ago, now supports hundreds of sites that they're now using in their multi-site form. So it can grow pretty rapidly. And of course, the return on investment is huge when the more you take advantage of it, and the more sites that you have. So the next thing that I think will help explain the purpose and the value of a multi-site is a story here. And this is a story about Jen, who is is in charge of an organization, or let's say communications maybe for an organization, and they have multiple websites, maybe multiple units, multiple locations, and there's different individuals that are in these units, locations, or whatnot, maybe different communications folks or marketing folks or owners or whatever, managers, and they all have their own website. They kind of do very similar things and serve similar purposes, but they were all built at different times. In one case, for Nick, he's got a Drupal CMS. It's hosted on AWS, Amazon Web Services, and he uses a vendor to support that website. He had a vendor that both built and supported it, called Acme Vendor here. Grace is in charge of running this other separate website. In their case, they're using WordPress CMS. They have some in-house hosting that they're using, and they have some in-house staff that built it and is supporting it as well. And then Rose here, another website she's in charge of. They built a custom CMS, and they are using Linode hosting and XYZ vendor. So this is a common issue that we've run into, and why we use multi-sites. And this is an issue that we've run into more than once, a story we've heard more than once. And the multi-site has been a boon to help sort of solve this problem of having all this disparity in all the different kinds of things that you need to sort of juggle as somebody who's in Jen's position, sort of make sure everything's running smooth and whatnot. So again, CMSs, content management systems. We've got WordPress, Drupal, Joomla, Sitefinity. There's more custom CMSs, as you saw. And if you have multiple sites and they're all on something different, you can just imagine that's difficult to support both technically and like in training. People just having experts that kind of know how to use that CMS becomes difficult. Also with hosting, who do you call? Yeah, well, it depends. Which site are we talking about, right? If one site is on DigitalOcean, another one's on Microsoft Azure, and a third one's on Google Cloud, you have to kind of keep track of that. And it's not something that we want to try to juggle if we don't have to. So really what we get down to here is we're trying to consolidate things. We're trying to keep things simpler for us to support if possible. And I think what we're trying to, what we want to show here is that it is possible in a lot of different scenarios. We want to try to sort of show what that could look like and how that works. So consolidation is the thing we're trying to do, but what we really mean is we need to save time and resources that are uselessly used to support, again, too many different and a disparity of different kinds of services and vendors and things that we're using. Training resources to make sure people understand how to use Drupal versus a WordPress versus another CMS. So we want to save time and resources. If we had, we don't want to grow, our support staff just to support, all those different kinds of things that we have for each of our websites. So if we can consolidate, we can limit who we get a call. So whether that's somebody who knows our CMS as well, because if we have just one, then we can know that we can call, whether it's a vendor or somebody in-house, support for hosting, right? If we just have everything hosted on one place, there's one person to call if something goes down or there's a change that needs to be made, performance problem or whatnot. And then you have a development team, right? This is a huge one. If you build a platform that's on a multi-site that is one single code base, you can call one development team either for, again, to create your new features or to support whatever other issues you might have and need them for. And I guess these other slides sort of just talk about what we just talked about. So centralized developer support, one team to call. Again, one hosting service, one hosting service to call. And then this is something I guess I didn't touch on with the one person to call, but I guess this gets into a little bit of training, right? If you have somebody on your team, we've run into this with some of the clients that we've worked with, where it's just sort of, they want to write documentation and be able to onboard new people. And, who knows how to use the site if it's different from all the other sites, and having one sort of unified authoring and site management experience means that you could, call somebody over from this other unit that uses a site to help onboard a new person from another adjacent unit, because everybody kind of that uses the product or uses this platform is familiar with it, and it becomes easier to onboard people, as well as just having a unified author experience for potentially documentation or I can't think of anything else, but that's the idea. Unified author experience just helps with all that kind of stuff, building new things as well. And then another advantage here, sort of a feature, is centralized user management. So you can, if you recall back to that picture of Jen, she has maybe a team that kind of helps support each of these units. They can, create a new site, add users to each of those sites. They can each have account access to each of the sites to be able to jump in and help people as needed, whether it's with content or administering some piece there. So centralized management can be a huge piece as well. So you don't have to create separate logins for each site, and you can easily manage multiple things and jump around as needed. So those are the things that so that's kind of describes a multi-site and the things that sort of make a multi-site useful. Let's kind of jump into what a multi-site is, using an example of the College of Fine and Applied Arts. We like to call this a platform, which is shared features and code and support, and one familiar authoring experience. and management experience. So College of Fine Arts, they actually approached us here, who this has been several years ago, and actually had this vision already of this thing that they didn't quite know how to describe, maybe technically, but they knew, hey, this has got to be possible, right? To have one sort of platform or interface that could be shared across all of their different units. I think they have 7 different units on top of just the college site, so 8 different sites. Since then, we've actually added a support for other sites that they found that, hey, we have a multi-site. How easy would it be to just spin up another site? And turns out it's not that hard. And the return on investment becomes more apparent as you start to utilize it more in this way. So this is the way that we kind of talked about it with them. So the College of Fine Arts has, like I said, multiple different sites, different schools, dance, theater, architecture. Here's just an example of a few. They all have unique needs in the sense that they need to look and be branded differently. Their content is somewhat different, but so much is the same. And just from an architectural standpoint, it's, the multi-site here for them, and almost all multi-sites are like this. You have one monolithic code base, which just means there's one code base that's shared on one server that runs everything, and then a shared database where all of the content management data goes in, all the page data and whatnot. And so when they came to us, we talked about their needs, and this is just an example, dance and theater and all the other sites had very similar needs. They needed news. They needed to be able to show, what was going on in the colleges or each of these units. Events, same thing. They all had events that they needed to be able to promote. Programs, they all have programs that they're offering. And then these last two are, faculty. They actually do highlight faculty, but this is one of their audiences are faculty and alumni as well. So alumni is something that they highlight. It's a piece of content that they wanted to highlight each of their different units. And it was also an audience that they shared among all of them. So this really made sense to all of us. This was a multi-site project, and we went forward with it. The other thing sort of to talk about when it comes to multi-sites is the things that are shared. And the big things that are shared that we just mentioned, audiences, types of content. Here's a few different things. So components and page types. I'll get into components in just a second here. Content components is what we call it. Some people call it different things, blocks or whatnot. But sort of this top row, this top row shows different blocks of content that you can use to create a page, right? So more than just text and images, you have calls to action. Sorry, struggling with the keys. Numbers component, this center one here with this 10,000, 140, 88%, and 12 to show, statistics or things like that. Other like sort of link cards. We have like a quote component here in the middle, some link tiles. We have all kinds of different components and that we can use throughout our platform to allow each of these units to create content in their own unique ways for their own unique content, but it still sort of fits the same shape. They're trying to accomplish the same kinds of goals. And then on the outskirts here, you see an events page and like a faculty page. And these are areas that are much more going to be less distinct. The needs are not different from site to site, right? News is news, events are events in that sense. So come back to these content components. If you're not familiar with this concept, this is a way that we build almost all of our content management systems, is to allow authors to have a library of rich building blocks to create content. Again, so it's just more than text on a page, text and an image or something. So you can use these link tiles and different things, and you can see that you can kind of choose the ones that you want when you go to create a page, and you can create sort of this rich dynamic page with just a set of the specific content components that we determined are the best fit for your organization. And this again helps with a multi-site, because basically a multi-site has more users, more sites, more pages if you add up all of the different multi-sites together, and just gives you such ability to create diverse pages across your site in the places where you need them. And like I said here, something like events and faculty, the need isn't as great. They can be very similar. And in just a second, I'll show you how we can sort of create different sites within your multi-site. So even these similar kinds of content look different and can be set apart from each other in different ways. They can look different, even if they're not the same exact brand. In this case, for FAA, we did want to sort of tie the brand together some and sort of have this family design concept applied to them so that they felt similar, but not exactly the same, and did have some differences. But they could be different too if there was a use case for that in other ways. And then finally here, another area here to consider is the navigation. So if you have two sites that the navigation's vastly different, maybe it only supports, you only really have a handful of pages, and another site has dozens of pages, the navigation just, it's not going to fit. And in this case, all these sites they were very similar. They all had lots and lots of content with hierarchical pages. And so this navigation with several levels that you could drill down into in the main navigation or in a sidebar navigation was something that, again, they all needed and was able to be supported, again, on our multi-site. So when I think about multi-sites, I think of kind of two kinds. And this slide sort of represents the top level, which I'm going to call clone sites. A clone site would be, well, I'll get to that in a second. To compare it to it, the other one on the bottom here would be a family of sites. And so the simplest multi-site is the clone sites. And you can think of this as like a business that has multiple locations or franchises. And so they're run by different folks, a different set of staff. They're serving different physical audiences, but they're the same kind or type of audiences. They're doing the same kind of work or the same type of business, but the sites virtually look the same. They might be named differently, have different URLs, different domain names, but they're actually almost exactly the same, except for the content, the actual content that's being delivered. And so in that sense, it's very easy to build this multi-site because all you got to do is support just the cloning process and make them separate, and you're off and running. But the thing and I guess here's some more examples of that. So franchises, we did this actually with University of Illinois Chicago. They had a need to support classes or professors to create class websites. And so we developed a multi-site that was able to just support what the needs of a professor might have for their class. Upload a syllabus, have assignments posted, things like that. And each of the sites looked virtually the same, except for the name of the class and that kind of thing. So government body sort of fits this too. I think, if you have a site that, like, I'll go back to that county idea. If you have a county site and you want to break out the site because the staff is different, you could do that. But they're going to be branded the same, and maybe the heading, the title of, this is the election area or assessors or health department or whatever, kind of grouping you have can be separated that way. Next, we have what I'm calling a family of sites. And this takes a little bit more work, as you can imagine. You want to take and utilize a multi-site. There's so many similarities, both in design and in features and content, but you want to add some distinction. And so I'm going to get into what we can do to make a family of sites a little bit easier to make each of your sites a little bit more diverse. And I'll say too, a lot of these slides and information here that I'm about to get into, Tyler already did a really nice presentation on, and this gets in just to a little bit of it. And so I'll invite Tyler to jump in whenever he finds a need. explain some of these concepts here, but this is a way, again, unique design in a multi-site, which can be tricky. And doing too much, the multi-site becomes a problem. It becomes kind of a nightmare to manage when there's too much change. And we have something we describe as skins here as a way to add a layer of design without adding too much complexity. In fact, very little complexity. So here we have some components. Actually, it's one component. This is a quote component. And so you can see that if we desire to or needed to, we could take a quote component and make it look very, very different, whether it's in a multi-site or in separate sites, right? These can look very, very different. You can see some of the things, the ways this is different is the layout. Some it's kind of stacked, some you have the image on the side, the left or the right. Colors, of course, are very different. The type or font face is different across this. It does retain the same basic information though. You got a quote, the text of the quote, you got a byline, you get an image, and then you have a call to action button. So how do we deal with that? How can we create some diversity with the least impact on production, like the effort to create each of these variations, but also even the maintenance of them too is a consideration, but also have the highest impact on style. And so we have this concept of skins where there's certain things we don't touch, and the elements, obviously the elements themselves all stay the same still, right? Image, quote, text, byline, and the button. But the layout also doesn't change, because that introduces quite a bit of complexity and change that we want to try to avoid. So here's an example of some skins that we can add some diversity to each of these different sites for each by adding a skin to every component. And we'll show some other areas where we can add skins too. And you can see the things that changed here are the type style, the colors, and that's basically it. But we can do a lot with that. We can do a lot of we can add a lot of distinction to each of these when we just utilize those things instead of trying to do more, change the layout completely, and that kind of thing. Here's another area, just a page, right? So a page for us, typically when we build out a page is made up of components, except for, the header, right, might be unique. And this is the header area here. And again, just changing some colors, some type styles gives it a unique and distinct look. So that's skins, and that is one way that we can add, again, sort of a layer on top of each of these sites to make them look distinct and unique and on brand for their particular needs. The other thing that we do is we change two important things that actually do add some complexity, but are important enough for us to add just this extra level of distinction between each site. And the first one is a homepage. So when we worked with this particular, on this particular project, we wanted every site to have their own custom homepage that fit their own needs and had their own distinct looks and brand. And so this here is a school of architecture, black and white, sharp corners, high contrast, was kind of the brand that they were looking for. And it was very different from the other sites that we had done. And this is compared, next to it is the Department of Urban and Regional Planning. And again, you can just tell visually, not only with sort of the content on the page, but it is different, but also the style. This here is another example comparing the Department of Urban and Regional Planning with the School of Architecture. And again, you can see the brand and the style has stayed similar on each site, and they're very distinct and different. But one thing that you'll notice is this is not a unique page in the sense that these are both landing pages on each site, and they share all the same content. And the other thing that we decided to do besides add skins and a very custom homepage is landing pages were such a sort of powerful piece of each site. We decided to also allow for a different landing page layout although it still contained the exact same kind of authoring interface, which means the same kind of fields were available. So each landing page has a title, programs and applying in this case. It has an introduction, and it has what we call a hero image. And so each of these sites supported the same thing. On the back end, it's the exact same. But each site had their own sort of unique look for a landing page. Beyond that, all the sites, interior pages and whatnot look the same. They do have that layer, that skin layer that we put on top of them for that show distinction with type and color. But these are the two areas we decided were a good fit to add a little bit of complexity that gave us a good return on investment to make the style unique for each of these sites. So that's it. Like I said, there's plenty to talk about. We have so many, we've done several projects that involve this sort of multi-site concept. There's all kinds of unique needs and specifics, and even within these projects here, this FAA project, we have other things that we get into that were really helpful for us to understand, both on a technical level and on sort of a conceptual level. But I'll leave it to you to ask any questions, to maybe bring up anything, and also open it up if Tyler or Lindsay has a comment to make about any of the stuff that we went over as well. Oh, it looks like Jenna posted, yeah, all the links. So this College of Fine and Applied Arts project has been in progress for several years, and still a couple sites left. And but many of them are launched. Looks like we have architecture, art and design, dance, theater, and the Department of Urban and Regional Planning that are up. You could take a look at those right now and kind of see how they look, how they are sort of distinct from each other in their style and brand. But they are the same CMS. They're the same sort of, we built one custom CMS that supports them all. And so you can kind of see, you can kind of just browse and see how they are similar in the content, but they're distinct in their style. Any questions or comments?
Yeah. Can I ask one, Jason?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. As Drupal's evolving and growing, is the community still focused on multi-site?
I don't know, so just so you know, WordPress, this particular site for the College of Fine and Applied Arts was a WordPress site. And so we've spent a lot of time on that in these last several years. Drupal has a distinct, different, how do I say it, a concept for what a multi-site is. And you can still do this kind of concept with Drupal, but it's not sort of we found it to be a little bit more difficult to make it happen, just because of the architecture of Drupal and how it works. Their multi-site structure, which is a core part of their feature set, is more about sort of sharing configuration and features and whatnot, and less about, I don't know what the right word is, but I guess you could say that it can support the same kind of structure. One of the big pieces is it doesn't have the built-in functionality to have one big monolithic database. So the Drupal, so this is sort of getting technical a little bit, but the Drupal multi-site structure out of the box is separate databases. And so you lose some of the cohesiveness of being able to do things. They could potentially all be hosted on separate servers too, in that way, where the code is the same, but there's different instances of it throughout as you need it. Whereas this multi-site structure, the way that we built it with WordPress, and again, you could probably do it with Drupal as well, is much more about building one sort of platform. And again, you could do it with Drupal. And so to answer your question directly, I don't know where sort of Drupal is headed with their sort of multi-site concept. We work a little bit with Pantheon, which is a Drupal and WordPress specific host, and they have some recommendations about how to do a multi-site with Drupal in particular, that involves, again, creating separate instances of a site rather than a single platform. And it seems to be that's kind of where Drupal kind of lives, is, hey, sharing the development work, but not necessarily creating a single platform is kind of my understanding. So
sure. I don't know, making sure I check the chat to make sure I'm not taking somebody else's time. But so building it in WordPress.
Questions.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Here, go ahead with this one here if you want.
All right, yeah. Do you build the design system before designing the site layouts? So I don't know, Tyler, if you have any thoughts on that?
That's a great question. Yeah. So, and I was actually going to speak a little bit to that as well when it comes to the skins themselves. So, Jason, if you wouldn't mind going back to the slide where you were talking about the quote component. Yeah, right here. So do we build the design system before we build this out? To a degree, yes, we do. And when we talk about design system, we are talking more holistically, not just the actual visual designs themselves and the styles, but also the components and the different templates that we're applying these skins to. But even before that, when it comes to the design decisions we make, one thing that we establish in the beginning for these design families is a larger bucket of styles to choose from. And so in particular, for the College of Fine and Applied Arts, we defined with them styles from the University of Illinois' Brand and Identity Guidelines. So we took their list of type styles and we defined that we're only going to use these type families within the entire system. We took all of their colors and we applied their colors to the system. But we also made really clear that with each unit that we worked with, they didn't have to use that entire array. They could pick and choose if they want. It was up to them, whatever made sense for their own individual characteristic and style. And then we were able to apply those styles uniquely throughout the design system. And so when we look at like the quote component here, this is just a little facet of that design system. This is a component within the system. If you go back one slide with the other more unique, the unique, yep, right there. Yep, perfect. Okay. Sorry. Mm-hmm. So this is an example of, all these different styles of this quote component are drastically different. The same kind of content is there, but they're not using the same component structure, and they're not using the same system, and they're using different kinds of typefaces and different kinds of colors. Where I'm going to have you go back even further, Jay. If you go back to the layout where you had all of those components, that big collage of components, just to give an example. Yeah, it's back. Oh, you're almost there. There it is. Yeah. So here's an example of like, within the system that we created all these different components that could be used. It basically in the toolbox of creating these websites for each unit. And then with those styles that we established beforehand, we make decisions with the unit on what styles make sense for you, and then we are able to apply those styles globally to all these components. And so instead of having to rebuild each component each time to be something wildly unique like that screen we just looked at with those different components, different quote components, we just apply the typefaces that we choose, the colors that we choose, and the button styles that we choose, and that populates all these different components to give them a different and unique style, but still work within the system that we've created. So yeah, and there's more I could expound on in that, but is that kind of getting us to a good place? Your question.
Yeah, and I would also add to that, Tyler, that in this particular project, once we define the sort of these global concepts, each time we approach the new site to add to the multi-site, right, we would then work with each of these units to define within that framework, right, that you had built, what they desired, the look that they desired, and buttons, right? Oh, I forget what we call that, the palette, right?
The design palette. Yeah, that's right.
We come up with a design palette for them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
That helps. Thank you.
Yeah. Perfect. Great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is it's this is a design system is what this is, if we're using the language, but it's a design system that can then multiply into different versions of that same system, which is really cool and very exciting.
Yeah. Now, and I will say, I think I already said it, but I'll reiterate, these are, this is just a piece of some work that Tyler has done to describe kind of what we're trying to describe right now, and did a really good job, has some really good slides. And I think you did this for a presentation last year in WebCon. So getting into this whole concept of a design family from beginning to end. So we just kind of touched on the surface.
I know we have some more time. We can take more questions, but I do just want to let anyone who's joining today know that this could be super complicated. It could be super easy. We've tried to simplify this to explain what multi-sites are, but we're very passionate about making something that's a right fit. So if you have more questions about multi-sites and don't feel like today's quite covered it, we're going to share Jason's email to kind of dig in more one-on-one with him about multi-sites and if it would be a right fit for what sites you're wrangling right now. But we're also going to share Lindsay's information and Tyler. So if it is more content related, or you have more questions that are design related and want to pick their brains, they're happy to share, because it definitely takes a team, as Jason mentioned in the beginning of this presentation, to have all this come together. So there's lots of facets involved. But we still have time for more questions now if anybody does have any for the team.
Yeah, and while we're waiting for any questions to come up, I might give Lindsay an opportunity to sort of talk about from a content strategy perspective, because that's really where a lot of this starts is, what's the content? What are we building here?
Yeah.
Maybe you can go into how that sort of shapes the project.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. So I'm a content strategist. So what I spend a lot of time thinking about is who are the sites and the things that we make for, and how can we customize what we're building to express what we need to express, the best. And the multi-site has been such a game changer at Pixo for that, because I think if you've been to any content strategy webinars, plug for future content strategy webinars from Pixo, basically they all revolve around priority. Like, don't spend your time on the things that don't matter, because you could sink endless time, money, energy into things that your audiences and your users really don't care about. And so the multi-site is all about priority, because we have to think, what is worth templatizing? What do we want to make custom? And so making those decisions, we made those decisions based on what we knew about projects in the past, and where that effort is where it's worth it to put your effort. And so it's just been such a boon for content for these sites that we've built, because we've already sort of pre-thought about that. We've started by making a recommendation for, yes, you get a custom homepage that's worth the time, energy, effort. And your faculty directory, for instance, that we see on this page, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. And so it just makes that content effort, which is so huge on any project, really. If you don't have content, if you don't fill the thing that you're building with text, images, messaging, you don't have anything. So the benefit of the multi-site is that, like I said, we've already sort of thought about that and made those decisions ahead of time to lower the risk that us, the content team, is going to be wasting time on things that aren't worth it, or wasting time reinventing the wheel where we don't need to.
Yeah, and just to follow up with another thought, it's kind of related, but just to give you some insight into how this whole project worked. It's this particular project is a multi-year project. We're not small sites; these were big sites. There was a lot of effort. Each site had a content discovery process, design process, and implementation process. And each site that we built features as needed for the most part. We identified some of the core features up front that everybody would need. But then we would identify, we would add more to each site as we did it. And what we've found and actually planned for, and it worked out, and again, we've done this multiple times, but in this particular project, there was a lot of concepts that we shared with our client, that we were all on the same page and we're all expecting the same kind of thing, was that each site needed less work. And that's the goal. And that's like I said from the beginning, consolidating things, choosing things, having things shared. So the first site was basically a full site build and took all the effort of a full site build. The second site took maybe 80% less time. The third site probably took about half of that, probably 40% of the time. And as we continued again from site to site, it became much more of just the stylistic changes and this design palette changes, and the feature set was pretty much there already for everybody else that had followed. And we've done very little in way of implementing new features or new kinds of components or things like that. So that was where the big win was here in this project, and it was really successful.
Absolutely. Yeah, I should have said, when I'm saying, yeah, we pre-made these decisions. We pre-made these decisions based on interviews, looking at what FAA needed. So it wasn't just out of thin air. It's kind of hard to keep that in mind, actually, because this has been such a multi-year project. I have to really stretch to think, yeah, that's right. How did we start this? Mm-hmm. But it's beautiful. When we got to that point where we were like, wow, the toolbox has everything we need. We don't need to add anything more for this new site. That feels really good.
Yep.
Ask one more question.
Sure.
First off, you guys are amazing with the design aspect, but I always go down the more technical roads. What do you guys think about using multi-site for like data aggregation and form building and different things like that?
Well,
so we have,
what do you mean?
Preface that with so state government, we have 26 plus laws, and we have forms just all done like PDFs, and we're trying to migrate them to some kind of platform and do it online, right? Mm-hmm. But ultimately, the solutions that have become available to us don't do a good job of streamlining some of the things. And I'd like to go with something like a WordPress Drupal for the data aggregation and all in one place, and the just the easy components that come with these open source solutions. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. This is somewhat of a familiar problem. Yeah, that is slightly different from the multi-site. You have, like you said, so I think of a digital asset manager, and that might be something you're familiar with or are even using, where you have, and we've toyed with this with shared, or done this actually with shared like news, like on campus or something, right? You want to be able to show stuff in a page on various websites, but you want it that managed centrally, one place where the news is created, a new story. So the architecture that's best for that, well, I'll get into, I'll answer that two ways. One is we've seen two different kinds of architecture. One is just to have your like a centralized news portal that is either public or it might be private, so that it's actually just an aggregation center, so that the content's created there, but it's actually consumed by separate websites using some sort of API or integration. So that's one way I've seen it done. Same thing with a digital asset manager. If you have like uploads or PDFs, like you mentioned, that's the same kind of thing. You have one place where you upload those things, or you use meta tags and taxonomies and whatnot to make it easy to find. And then you have an integration into each of your sites. I think that's the thing that makes where a multi-site can come in, because you only have to build, it's easy to build one integration right into the platform that can, and even keep that, the digital asset manager separate from the project. Could potentially be in the project as well if it only was going to be used by the multi-site. So that's one way. I forgot already a second way that I was thinking of. Maybe it'll come to me in a second. Oh, well, no, now I remember. We actually are going to be doing that with this project. We haven't done it yet, but we've already done sort of the proof of concept for it, and it's the basically ladder technical way that I mentioned, which is we're just going to build a a way for, in this case, the college wants to be able to highlight news stories and profiles of people and doesn't want to duplicate that content. And so we're building in a way for us to basically pull in data from any of the sites, and it'll be basically just be a feature, an integration in which you can create either a page or a component. And we're already doing this now, like on a profile or a profile directory. You can create profiles, and then you have a page where you can list profiles, and you can choose what kind, is it staff or faculty or whatever. And we're basically going to allow not only for you to choose those kinds of levels of things if you want to list out some people, but you could also choose which site they're coming from, whether it's dance or theater or any of these other sites. So in that sense, that's a very unique need and whatnot. It's really only going to one site, and that's why I think it better fits the model for what they're trying to do. If it was more of a general need, like a digital asset manager, I would probably suggest having a separate tool for that and integrate it using some sort of API or something. Does that answer your question, Stephen?
Yeah, I think so. I just know WordPress, for the longest time wasn't always the best tool for us in regards to that kind of data aggregation. It's a pain point that we see across these solutions that are available to us, whether you're hard coding buildings from, like in our case, we do a lot of .NET framework stuff, and we're always dealing with how do we do something a little bit easier. And my background says these content management systems are perfect for some of these things, but they're either not enterprise ready. We don't have some kind of master contract agreement in place. So those are all things in the back of my mind. But at the basic level, we're always looking for something that manages data. In our case, it's always form data, and we tried to make that work in Drupal. You bring up these ideas of multi-sites, and I think of having one place to go and having access to all of our different things, right? So I still try to make it work in my head, even though still quite doesn't quite seem there all the time.
Yeah, there's this is a challenge, and there's multiple ways to handle it. So I hear you.
Thank you for
You bet.
Well, we're at about 4 till now. So if there are more questions, we're happy to answer. We can stick around. Otherwise, you'll certainly email us. We got lots of emails Jenna's thrown in the chat, but we'll also follow up via email as well. Pixo likes talking about stuff like this, so don't hesitate to reach out and start a conversation. And otherwise, have a great rest of your week, and we'll be here for a little while longer if anybody wants to hang out with us and chat more. But thank you all.